Hello and welcome to the Gothic Unicorn. Today I'm going to be continuing work on things to go in my 1/12 scale attic. The main things that I want to do today is to actually alter a couple of pieces that I think I want to include. Now, I've got a lot of work to do on the structure of the attic, but work on that is in some ways dependent on sorting out certain issues, in particular the lighting for the room underneath. Now, work on the lights is underway, and I'm hoping that I can get around to sorting out how I want the attic to look pretty soon. I'm debating on colours and things like how I'm going to do the false wall that I want, but it is in progress, even if it's still at the thought stage at the moment. Now, the first piece that I want to look at is this chair. Now, this is a resin rattan cane effect chair that I bought from Doll's House Emporium. I've got to say, it's got to be 15 years ago. Now, I'm not even sure why I bought it. I bought a few bits that were sort of garden themed, although I didn't have a garden, and it's never been out of the box, which you can probably tell because the plastic, and I hope this shows up on the camera, is incredibly discoloured. It's almost brown because it's been in there that long, and this has been put away. It has been in storage pretty much since day one. So I'm going to look at this, and I want to look at making it look a bit more suitable for my attic. Now, I've taken the chair out of its box, and it's a pretty good model for a resin model. It's just a bit rough around the edges. The cushion is totally not colours that I can see working in my doll's house, and the chair looks almost too new. I've got Grandmama here, and if I pull her skirt in, because she doesn't fit in the seat very well, you can see that it's a reasonable chair for the scale. Now, I'm not really looking at this chair being used for anybody to sit in, so I'm not worried about whether Grandmama or anybody else that may join the family looks like in there, but it just gives me an idea that it will actually work. The one good thing about resin is that it is pretty easy to paint. The acrylic paints work on it. I've done resin figures and things like that in the past. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and find some paint, and then we'll start giving this a bit of a makeover. Although, is it really a makeover if you're making it look older? Is that more of a make under? That one always confuses me. What do you think? Now, I'm going to go for a kind of greyed out effect to the chair. You know, that kind of look that wood gets when it ages, when it's been outside and that kind of thing for quite some time. So I was debating using a black undercoat, but I think actually there's enough dark in amongst these that I can actually do away with the black. I think I'm going to put some black on the legs because there's some interesting looking gold bits on the feet that I don't want. And I might also do the bits that are more sort of obviously wood, you know, the thicker bits of the framework in black. I think with the cushion I'm going to go with black with a purple stripe, going with the kind of colour schemes that works with my doll's house. And yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking at. So I'm going to start off with some dark grey paint. I've got out dark grey, light grey, and then storm cloud, which is lightest grey for starters, and we'll see how I get on. I have finished with my base coat, for want of a better word. I have gone heavy on the framework, which I think works quite well. And then I've sort of gone for a heavy dry brushing on the rest of it. Now, I didn't want too many areas where there were big clumps of paint, so I went fairly light on the painting. You know, I wasn't trying to dab it into all the gaps. I was planning to do a couple of coats, but it's actually come out better than I like, and I like the fact that I've got the dark showing through, and it looks kind of dirty and old. So I'm going to carry on with this, with doing some highlights in light grey and then possibly in the storm cloud, which is a very pale grey even. But I'm really liking how it's looking. I think it's going to work really, really well in my attic. It was a case of, this was a piece that I'd never used. It was a case of either find a use for it or move it on to somebody that would use it. And I think this is going to be the perfect use for it. I have added my highlights now. A lot of dry brushing. I don't know how much of this you're actually going to be able to see, but I'm liking the way it's going. I'm liking the sort of aged, worn look. I have, while I've been working, had a bit of an idea, and the cushion, which I want to paint, obviously, I want to make it look quite worn. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to use my rotary tool, which is basically like a Dremel, and try and make a bit of a hole, indentation in it, so I can actually make it look like the cushion is split, has burst open, and then once I've painted it I can put some fluff of some description coming out of it, so it looks like it's well worn. At least that's the idea. If it doesn't work, I'll be filling the hole back in with some UV resin and then painting over it probably. So I'm going to have a go at this and then I'll show you the results. I have managed to put a hole into the cushion. I quite like the sort of size and shape of it. It's not too big, but it's big enough that I'm going to be able to put some kind of stuffing coming out of it once it's all painted up and cleaned up. So the next step is obviously to paint the cushion, which I'm going to do with black and a dark purple for the stripe. It's the sort of only colours I can go with that will work with the general aesthetic of the house. The blue and pink just has got to go. The cushion has been painted and I've put a thin coat of matte Mod Podge all over the piece. Now I've done that because I want to add some aging and I don't want to risk washing the paint off with my washes. Simple as it will hopefully reduce some of the shine, but to be fair, most of the shine is on the cushion and I don't mind that. Now, at the moment I've just got a dink in the cushion. I want to add the washes before I had the stuffing coming out, which is what I want to put on there. Simply because I want the stuffing to actually be white, so it looks like it's fairly fresh. Yeah, so to age it, I'm using my witch's brew, which is simply water and black craft paint. I reuse the same pot. I keep this mixed up most of the time. I add more water and more paint as needed. And all I do is I just run this over. It will settle in certain places. It'll run down into the lowest places. And I can remove excess with a bit of kitchen towel. And yep, that will give it a bit more dirt, a bit more grime, make it look how I want it to. Now I will probably add some staining onto the cushion, maybe with some of the grey paint, just sort of stipple a little bit on so it looks a bit mildewy. I think it's mildew that looks grey. You know, it's not supposed to look pleasant when it's finished. It's been put up in the attic for a reason, and I like to think part of the reason is because Grandmama is not one of these people that likes getting rid of things very quickly. So I'm going to finish doing this, let that dry again, and then I'm going to give the cushion a little bit of attention. The wash has dried off mostly. Now what you'll find is if you use water over the top of Mod Podge, it can reactivate the Mod Podge. It makes it wet again. What I find is it tends to wet the Mod Podge and not wash the paint underneath off, which is why I've used it here. There's a little bit on the back of my cushion where the Mod Podge hasn't quite dried out again, but the rest of it's dry and it'll get there, and they're not the bits that I'm intending to work on. So I'm starting with a little bit of my really light grey, which is Storm Cloud, and I've got a very beaten up, very rough paintbrush. This is sort of what I call a kid's paintbrush, the ones that aren't very much good, but I generally keep them for cutting up, to be fair. This has actually had a haircut in the past. It's missing some of its bristles. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a patch down here, which just add some white to that corner so it looks a bit, yeah, for want of a better word. And then I've got sage green. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wipe my brush on good old kitchen paper towels. I'll use that to dab off as much of the paint as I can, and I'm just going to put some green over top of the light grey, and that's just going to give my little patch of something a bit more depth. So as you can see, I've now got my little patch of, it might be mould or mildew. It doesn't look particularly good. Now while I'm on, I am going to grab a smaller brush. That one will do. And I'm just going to put a little bit of the Storm Cloud into the dink that I made in the cushion. This is just so that when I add my bits of fluff, and I've got a bit of fluff sitting there, it will look like it's coming out of more of the same. Now all this is some polyester toy filling. That's what it's sold as. It is there's far more there than I need. I've got far more than I really need, even in my hand here. This is just going to give me a bit of dimension to this, and I will probably have to go back with my little scissors in the end and just give it a bit of a trim. But what I've got is I've got some of my Cosmic Shimmer acrylic glue, and I've got a little cocktail stick to just blob some into the hole. Now I'll have to use the same cocktail stick because I can't find a spare one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this bundle of fluff and I'm going to push it down into the glue. Now this is where I could do with non-stick fingers because it would make life so much easier. And what I'm probably going to do is I'm probably going to just dab a bit of glue onto various places and stick some of the fluff down onto it. Now this obviously needs some drying time, but you get the idea, I hope, that it actually looks like the cushion's been ripped and the contents are coming out. So I'm going to go and fuss about with this for probably a good 20 minutes or so, and then I'll show you the results a bit later on. The second piece that I am looking to refinish today is this brass effect rather hat stand. Now this is actually one of my oldest minis. This predates the doll's house by a couple of years, and a time when I was buying some miniature pieces just because I liked them. At the time I had no plans to get a doll's house, not in the short term, but I bought some pieces, and this one has stayed around. Now it's made of metal and it's finished in a gold colour, but I'm going to treat it as if it was brass, not brash, and I'm going to try and dull it down a bit so it actually looks like a piece that hasn't been cared for a good while. Now I've looked online and I've looked for tarnished brass, aged brass, and what I found is that they can get a patina which sort of makes it look dull, but also they can get a bit of a patina sometimes that sort of resembles the kind of patina you get on copper, you know, that kind of nice greeny bluey colour. Now, anybody who's ever worn a cheap ring or a cheap bracelet will know about this, because it's the same kind of effect that turns your skin green when you wear it, blue-green when you wear it. So I'm going to try and replicate a bit of that. I think I'm going to start with some dark grey paint again, just sort of roughly apply it and see how I get on. I have been over the piece with the dark grey paint. I seem to be using a very grey palette today. It's not deliberate, it's just how it sort of panned out. Now I've used a kind of dry brushing technique, which is a great one to learn for miniatures, because you can use it even if you don't want to fully distress something. You can use it to add that hint of age, that hint of lived-inness, lived-inness? I don't know. I'm making words up as I go along today. But you know, it makes your scene look more realistic. Realism is in the imperfections, in the things that aren't perfect, because real life isn't perfect. You know, we all do it. We clean our houses, they look absolutely brilliant, and then the rest of the family comes home and it looks like you've never bothered within 10 minutes. That is life. And I think that although some people love this idea of perfection in their dolls' houses, there's always going to be something going wrong. and dry brushing is great for that. It allows you to replicate that mark where somebody spilt something and you can't get it up, or just that sort of piece of furniture that's seen better days. Dry brushing can help you with that. Anyway, having done the dark grey, my very grey palette today, I'm going to go back to the sage green that I used a little tiny bit on the chair, and I'm also going to introduce a little bit of this one, which is called Lagoon. I'm going to use this very sparingly because it is a strong colour, but I want it to suggest some really severe patina. Now I can actually see some places on here where I possibly should have added a bit more grey, and I may add a bit more grey around the bottom ring because it is annoying me, although it's not going to be visible when it's in the house. Otherwise though, I'm quite pleased with how this is starting to look. From a distance, which is how it is going to be seen, this is the closest that anybody apart from me is going to get to it, because it's going to go in the back of a room. You know, it's going to look like it needs a clean. That's what I want it to look like. So I'm going to start with some sage green and just adding some more paint on top of what I've already applied. I've added the sage green in places. I don't want it to be the dominant colour by any means, and I'm just going to add a little bit of this Lagoon. Now this is a very bright colour, so as I said, I need to use it sparingly. So I'm using a finer brush, but I am still going to take most of the paint off of the bristles. There's very little there, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit, yeah, that works. I'm going to add a little bit around some of the joint sections where I figure there might be a bit more tarnishing, because obviously one piece will have been attached to another somehow. Now I don't know if you can actually see that where I've added that, but it is just little tiny bits, and I'm going to carry on and repeat this around the piece, just very sparingly though, and then we'll look at maybe aging it a little bit more in a slightly different way to how I aged the chair, and that should see it done. The kind of final bit of aging that I want to do to the hat stand is to add some dirt. Now I could use the black wash that I used earlier, but I don't want to because I think I need to use something thicker, so I'm going to use some of my black paint, and I'm going to use that little that I only need the bit that's in the lid. I'm using the same small brush that I used for applying the Lagoon paint, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this into the sort of crevices. I want to suggest dirt, grime, etc. So even if this had been cleaned, we're looking at the bits around the walls at the head, you know, just a few little bits. To suggest that it's dirty, and more especially I want a few little bits lower down because dirt seems to settle lower on pieces, and then some dirt as well as some tarnish. So if I get it into these little bits where the bits of the where the parts, rather, not bits, where the parts of the legs come up and join the actual stand. And as I say, I'm using tiny amounts of paint here. I just want, oh, that's a bit heavy-handed. I just want to suggest that if it has been cleaned, it hasn't been cleaned very well at times in the past. So, as you can see, I've just put some random bits of dirt. You can be far more exacting than I am. You can use a far finer brush than I am, but this is adequate for my needs, and I'm kind of liking, I'm not so keen on the marks there, but what I might do, because it went a bit thicker, is I think I'm going to put some black paint sort of thinly over that bit, and then if anybody questions it, somebody spilt paint on it. It can happen, can't it? And if you know the sort of stuff that I'm putting in this doll's house, there are a number of pieces that have probably been painted at some time in the past. I'll put a bit more there. Now, I can't say how much of this is actually going to be visible because, as I say, it's going in the back of my attic and it's going to have some mats hanging on it eventually. Maybe even a cloak. Perhaps I might make a what looks like a hanging witchy cloak. But I think that's where I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to go too over the top. But I've just made it look incredibly unloved, and that's the idea. I have some more pieces that I'm intending to make for my attic, but I think that for today I'm going to leave it here with these two. Now, as I have probably said in previous videos, Doll's House Attic is the perfect place to put things that you want to include in the house but don't really fit anywhere else. And it is a great place to put those broken bits of furniture that you love but can't fix, or to make other things look like they're not loved quite so much anymore. I am really pleased with how the chair has come out. If you've got a small enough spring, you could put a spring coming out of a cushion like this. You could put some straw to make it look like the cushion is filled with straw. I'm thinking that this cushion is probably a bit more modern and has got some foam and then some padding on top. That's how it works in my head. And then of course I have dulled down my brassy hat stand. It's a simple piece, it's a simple transformation, but it's going to work in my doll's house. And I hope that I've shown you that you can take quite cheap pieces and make them fit your own vision. If you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you have, please like, comment and subscribe, and maybe even consider ringing the notification bell so that you know when I've uploaded a video. I upload most weeks, mostly on a Friday, but life sometimes gets in the way, you know, it does that. Anyway, until next time, bye.